Up pretty well. All right, so in terms of tonight's premise, the idea is, first of all, I teach in the area of entrepreneurial finance, venture capital, and we often celebrate that model of growing a company, which is high growth, take on outside funding. And last year, some people had made the observation that, bootstrapping is an enormously powerful and important part of entrepreneurship. It would be great if you guys would do an event dedicated to that. Bill and I had lunch last fall, and I was just blown away with his insights about A, why bootstrapping has made sense for his companies, as well as B, some of his insights about growing companies. And so it's really a pleasure to have him here. For those of you who don't know Bill, he is truly an entrepreneur going back to his high school days, throughout college, has been involved really throughout his life with entrepreneurship, had a very big success with a company called Reg Online, and then got involved with companies as an investor, did not find that as satisfying and meaningful as he would have liked, and so he shifted the model, as any good entrepreneur would, and has developed something called the Felix Fund, where he works very closely in an angel investor capacity, but especially as an advisor and a facilitator of sharing of information across 4 companies in the area, many of which you probably know: Survey Gizmo, Snap Engage, former Techstars company, Sticker Giant, as well as Poster Brain are involved with that. Please help me welcome Bill Flagg.
Thanks, Brett. First of all, I wanted to get some more clarification of the people. There's a lot of people in the room who are thinking about bootstrapping. How many already have an operating business with paying customers? Okay. And how many have a business in mind that they're thinking of starting up, that they're kind of debating on, would I go raise money or have, okay, bootstrappers. So I'll start off by saying the number one, and I'm biased, okay, that's the one thing I'll start with here, because the number one reason why I became an entrepreneur was, for me, was freedom. I grew up the youngest of 5 kids, and when my brother wasn't kicking the crap out of me, my sisters were bossing me around, and what I had to look forward to at the end of the day was somehow they rigged it so that I had to do dinner dishes. So at a certain point at a young age, I thought, I really don't want to be taking orders from anyone else, and I want my freedom to kind of be able to live the way I want to. So I quickly, one of the things I learned from my family, my father, my uncle, grandparents, who all had owned their own businesses, was if I could be of value to people and continually look to see how I can be of value in whatever business I am, then eventually I'll be successful if I just follow that. I had no idea that I had options to go out and raise money for my first, for any of my businesses, frankly. And it wasn't until after I was successful, really successful, that I said, wow, I'm glad that option didn't present itself to me, because I realized the huge benefits that I got from bootstrapping. And I want to share some of those with you, and some of the things that have made I think my companies really successful. So all 4 companies that Brad mentioned that I'm involved with now, they all bootstrapped with the same premise, which is they had people, customers, that wanted something they couldn't really get somewhere else, and those entrepreneurs, those founders, created that for a customer. So they had a customer before they even started their businesses, and that's how I started my first businesses. The thing that from starting from that premise that creates a safe place, which is different from now what I'm seeing with a lot of entrepreneurs who are given money or have investors that are investing in their idea, and their idea is something that they think people will want and will need and willing to pay for. But I find that the time frame for them really discovering the truth on that is extended much longer. And the problem is that it gets extended and the money either keeps getting re-raised or it runs out, and in the end you don't have a successful, sustainable business. So the second thing for me was I'm a little bit, I'm definitely, believe it or not, it's kind of an oxymoron, I'm risk averse. And I don't like things failing. In fact, I've been known to say I hate startups, which is kind of like, for an entrepreneur, like, well, how could you say that? And the reason is because there's so much failure in most startups because the one premise, do I have customers who are willing to pay for the value that I deliver, who want what I have and are willing to pay for it? And so I'm going to sort of share some examples of, it comes back to, we're talking about source of funding. The best source of funds, and I heard this put by Seth Levine from the Foundry Group, and I love that he said this. So the best source of funds are your customers. And the truth is, we don't really have businesses unless we have customers and paying customers. I'm in the business-to-business segment. Sure, you can be in a consumer business with advertising revenue, and that's a whole different story. But finding the customers that are willing, having the customers be your source of how you're going to grow your company. So from there, once in each one of these businesses, in my own business, we discovered there was a source of funds. We were forced, because we had very little dollars, to figure out what extra dollar that we spend will produce an extra dollar of value for our customers. And that extra dollar of value has to be defined, whether it's of value, by the customer. And so there are certain aspects of that. For example, in Reg Online, my partner had literally bootstrapped it, moonlighting out of his basement with a daytime job, built the registration software, online registration for conferences and events. Originally had one customer that he built it for, expanded it out, offered it to more customers, they bought it, and as soon as he had enough money, he quit his job, and as soon as his customers were paying him enough money, he hired his first developer, and then he hired his first support person. But it was always staged with how he was able to provide value to a growing number of customers. And one of the examples, when I got involved with Reg Online, it was a handful of employees, about $1 million in revenue, and just starting to be profitable. And I looked at where dollars were being spent. So there's probably about, I think about $50,000 a year being spent on advertising in meeting and event magazines that event planners would read. Perfect place to advertise. Because it was a website, we were able to ask customers where they found out about us. We were able to track, did they find us through an ad. And what I discovered was it was sort of inconclusive whether the ad was really worth it or not. At the same time, we had a customer service, one customer service person who was being worked ragged and couldn't barely get back to people, let alone in 1 day, but 2 days. And so the first thing I looked at was, can we provide more value to customers by having more customer service representatives? So we cut the ad budget, we hired 2 more customer support reps, and lo and behold, our customer satisfaction went up and our referral rate went up, because these meeting planners tend to compare notes with each other. And so that was, each step of the way in each one of my businesses that I'm involved with, I asked that question: is this dollar returning a dollar value? Now, we could say, for example, we're advertisers. We advertise, we spend, hundreds of thousands of dollars a year advertising on Google, for example. And, but we are able to know that customers are able to find us, buy our product, and we're able to do it profitably because of the direct correlation there. If we don't know, which is there's a lot of dollars spent. I mean, sometimes those dollars are spent on extra people in our organization where we think they're going to make a difference. We think they're going to bring on the next big partnership. We think they're going to be able to do things for our business. And they come in, they start working, we like them, they get along with the team, we're building and growing a team, we really want to have a great culture. and we forget to ask, are they really adding value to our customers? One way to add value to customers, I say, is making it easier for them to find us, and that's why we may advertise in certain cases on Google. But there's so many other instances where we're spending dollars that aren't really returning anything. Now, I've also been involved in companies in the past that have raised money, lots of money, tens of millions of dollars. And I see that connection, that tie to the, is this, pedigree, person that we're going to bring from this big company in who must know how to bring the company to the next level because they're making all this money at these other big companies. I've seen us hire too many people that then didn't pan out in the entrepreneurial environment. And none of my companies have ever had the luxury of hiring for those people. And so we've bootstrapped it. And whereas if we had more funds available, we would have spent a lot more money and had a lot more waste going on in what we were spending money on. So the other example was one of our biggest competitors at Reg Online was a company that was spending a lot of money on advertising. In addition to that, they were spending a lot of money on highly commissioned salespeople. And I always say the best way to know whether you're delivering value is to ask your customers or listen to them. And so we would have prospects who would become new customers. We would talk to them and ask them, why did you decide to use Reg Online? And they said, to be honest with you, your salespeople were a lot nicer and a lot less pushy than your competitor. And I said, all right, well, that's interesting. My salespeople are commissioned too. And I started doing the math in my head about how some of our salespeople act like commissioned salespeople. Does anyone know when they're talking to a commissioned salesperson here? Well, it's more common than not that you know that that the person is on commissions. And so I wanted to, as we heard enough of that feedback from our prospects and customers, I decided to eliminate our commissioned sales force, or at least the commissions, not the sales force. And so we were ended up paying, our salespeople probably half as much in the end, but they were more effective. Why? Because they could deliver more value than the commissioned salesperson. And I often say, over the years as I bought cars, I bought despite the salesperson that's helping me. And a similar story of we had 30 people at Reg Online, and it was time to switch from our homegrown CRM system to use Salesforce. And I was going to buy Salesforce. I was ready to do it, but the salesperson, and I was probably going to do it in the next month or so. But the salesperson was so motivated by getting it into the end of the quarter, he ended up giving us 30% off on an entire ticket, which was a big dollar amount, if we were willing to sign the contract by the end of the month, which was also the end of the quarter. And this was obviously a commissioned salesperson as well. And so even great companies, I think Salesforce, well, I don't know what the reputation is nowadays, but a pretty successful, one of the first biggest successes in software as a service. Really, I said, gosh, they are not only did I not get value, did I not get my questions answered by this commissioned salesperson, I had to go to their tech guy to get the real answers, but he actually cost them 30% on what I was willing to pay. And if he knew that our internal system was losing our customer data, our homegrown system was losing our customer data, and he helped me do the math, which I already knew what the math was on it, but he walked through that conversation with me to say, how much is it costing you to lose your customer data? I would have paid twice as much, not 30% less. So that being keen and aware of that, I was forced to do it, and my partners and my companies have been forced to look at, is a dollar of value, is spending this dollar going to get us a dollar value, and are the dollars that we're already spending returning the value too? The other commonality in the startups, and I think Joel's a great example of it with OpenSnow, is these startups, they're technology startups. I think you need to have, and certainly software as software, heavy software startups, I think you need to have a technology partner who's willing to work for sweat equity. And you got to, it's hard because you want to make sure you pick your partners like you would pick a spouse. But I think in a lot of in the technology businesses, yeah, I could see how people would need to go raise money to get the technology built if one of the partners wasn't building it themselves, because there's a lot that goes into that. The second thing that we discovered as we were growing these companies, for the companies that are already off the ground and have revenues, is finding your core customer. And I have a couple examples of that. Most companies that are that I've been involved with that are being funded are trying to go big fast, and there's a lot of reasons for it, such as competitors will get there first, and we can really capture the whole market. So they throw a wide net. Now, bootstrapped entrepreneurs should throw a wide net as well, just to get started. An example would be Snap Engage. So they were a Techstars company. They developed and designed a product. They had a whole beta user group, and lo and behold, people weren't willing to pay for it, and the investors weren't willing to give them money to fund them for this idea that they had developed at Techstars. And as they came out of it, when they came out of Techstars and they couldn't raise the money, they started asking their beta customers, what is it that you would want to pay for? And a couple of people mentioned, actually it's probably one to start with, mentioned, we would like a way to do live chat that's integrated with Skype and Google Chat. So on our site we'll have live chat, and we're already using, our developers and our customer service people who are doing email are already using Skype to communicate with each other, and this would be great if this was integrated in it. They came out with that, no one else is offering it, and sure enough, another customer, customers started flowing in at this very entry-level product that took them literally a week to cobble together. They then, a similar model, started growing their customer base, their revenues, and hired only when they could afford to hire another person based on those revenues. No outside investment at all. And so, fast forward 2 years later, or a year and a half later, and now they've got a couple thousand customers. And we're looking at who the customers are, and they're all over the place. You got the people coming in on the free plan, and the $9 plan, and the $19 plan, and the $49, and then you've got these enterprise level customers who have 50 agents on the system who are paying them, $1,000 a month. And so the interesting thing that happened though is when we looked at it, we saw that the customers who were coming in on the entry level, because over the course of the year and a half, they're adding more features and making it more robust. And what they found was that they were attracting the customers who wanted more of an enterprise level product, who had a support team that wanted to be able to use, have a dozen agents working on it, like Airbnb, for example, and or Edmunds.com, and so we started looking at who was their core customer, who is the customer that's willing to pay the most and get the most value out of the product, and who are the happiest. And believe it or not, the ones that were the least happy were the entry-level customers. They'd come in, they'd have a lot of challenges because they didn't have technical resources. We'd help them out. They'd come in, they realized they didn't have enough traffic on their site, and they'd cancel their monthly subscription 3 months later. Well, those accounts accounted for a large chunk of business, but we're bringing in more and more in every day. So when we looked at it, we decided to discontinue the lower price plans and focus and communicate on the website that we're an enterprise level software. So the lowest plan being $49 a month. Lo and behold, our trial rate went in half, but our additional revenues that came in went up. The incremental revenues went up because we were able to attract more of the core customer and a lot less of the customers who were who were taking up a lot of time, a lot of resources, and accounting for a lot of, a big number of customers. So the idea of being able to focus in on, focus in on your core customers really makes a difference. Reg Online, it was a similar scenario, and it's not always the biggest customers. We found that the customers like the American Expresses and the IBMs and the customers that come in and say we want you to do an RFP and a big to do and lots of negotiating and all that were actually our worst customers. They took the most amount of development resources. They really weren't, from a revenue standpoint, significant enough. And so in Reg Online's business, we decided that we weren't doing any more customizations. And so you can lop off both ends, but the idea of getting to the sweet spot of who your core customers are. And I see it in everyday businesses all the time. Anyone here know Black Hat in town, the restaurant? It's a restaurant that you go in and you can't have less than a 3-hour dinner. But they realized that they had an a la carte menu for a while with a 7-course and a 10-course meal that you could also get with wine pairings and all that. But what they did was realize their core was special events. People coming in for anniversaries, for special occasions, birthdays, and that those people really wanted to just be tailored and taken care of. And so what they did was they really minimized to just the very bottom of the menu, the a la carte options, and made the center point the 7-course, 10-course fixed price menus. And within a month, their revenues went up by 30% without changing a single item of food on the product. So there's something that's to be said about knowing your core and creating a packaging around it as well from a pricing standpoint that can really be learned. Another example, is John from Sticker Giant here? Sticker Giant had a similar scenario. We had these specials that we would run stickers for $80. You'd get 250 stickers, and it accounted for about half of the number of orders that came in. But it only accounted for, I think, 15 or 20% of the actual revenues. And on top of that, they're some of the hard, they're hard customers. They didn't have repeat orders, and we made a decision. Let's cut that out and focus on the people who really have a need for a I think it was $150 minimum order. And so we were able to increase our revenues while cutting the workload in half in terms of the number of people we were having to serve, which made the organization incredibly efficient, more profitable. And the best part of being able to know your core and serve a little bit a step up from an entry-level market is that we can spend more time being even more valuable to the people who are going to be good long-term customers that they're going to be happy paying a higher price and see a lot more value in it. So, how much time are we good?
If you have another point, go for it. If not, we'll take a few questions and we'll transition
Perfect.
to the panel.
Okay.
Let's take 3 or 4 quick questions. And student affirmative action policy at Silicon Flatirons, where students get first crack. Student question first.
What do you count to be the percent of that core that's actually responsible for 80% of the vast majority of the revenues? Are those long hold up, or is it something that's Mike, that you found to be a little different in your experience with each of the companies?
It depends. Are you talking, well, in terms of actual number count of customers versus revenue they account for? I think I would define the core as probably 80% of your revenue, and yeah, maybe, but it's not what you think. It's actually the 20% of revenue that wasn't the core was accounting for 50%. Like 40% of the. Yeah, it was 50% of the customers were accounting for 20% of the it's not exactly on, but I'd say if you could see that there's a good 70% or higher that falls into a category, and it's also about differentiating. I don't believe in, there's way too many competitors at entry level, and there's way too many competitors at the top level. So in the event business, there's these guys, there's I think 4 or 5 guys who competed for 200 of the top events in the country. And I got to know those guys. We didn't compete with them. We sent customers their way. They sent them our way. And I was like, would not want to be, one of the sales guys at those companies. And then at the very entry level, you got the Evites or whatever, and it's very, everyone wants it for free, that kind of thing. And that's why I love the middle market. I love that middle section. And you can say that about anything. I mean, you could say, Black Hat is a middle market restaurant. It's not Frosca or some higher end, fancier restaurant, but it's also it's definitely a step above what the other options the other options in Boulder, for example.
Just to be clear, Black Hat's not sponsoring.
But they're a great restaurant.
Yeah, right.
From those lower level, the entry level, were you able to?
Yep.
Were you able to track whether or not they converted to your $49 model? How many, or did you lose them entirely?
When we saw in the case of Snap Engage, we saw our trial rate go in half. Like the number of people who came to the site and it went down by like 40%. So at first you're like, did we just make a mistake? But then when we watched the revenues on the number of people how many more people were willing to pay the higher price, because pricing is signaling as well. If we have free and $19 options on Snap Engage, for example, then the guy who's at HTC Mobile, for example, as a customer, would come to the site and go, I don't know if this is really going to handle our needs, but if they see it starts at $49, it sends a signal that says, yeah, I'm not just getting entry level here. And
were you able to see whether some of the people that were entry level converted to the $49?
Well, we grandfather in the software as a service business. You can do this nice thing where you grandfather in the old customers and you don't raise their prices on them. We were doing it with just new customers coming in, so we haven't forced new pricing on them. But at Reg Online, we did. And part of the story I didn't mention was when I came in, we were charging about $3 per registrant, and we constantly had people saying, "How can that be? I'm used to paying $10 a registrant." And we had other people who were saying, $3? Don't you have a free option, right? And so it kept us at that $3 for a while. And I'm like, wait a second. And when we moved our pricing within the course of probably a year and a half up to $5 from $3, like huge margin difference for us. And we saw our growth grow as a result of doing it, because it sent a powerful signal to say we're actually worth more, and we're probably we're considered an option comparable to the high-end enterprise, which in software as a service it was kind of our competition, the installed software that they would charge $100,000 a year for, where we could do their same event for a couple thousand a year.
I've got 2 questions for you. First one is, how did you incent your salespeople? If you took away their commissions,
right,
where was their carrot? And second question is, of the software companies that you've bootstrapped, how many were in the SaaS model where it takes a lot more time and customers to actually build a revenue base?
So the first question about coin-operated salespeople. I got that term from someone that I was interviewing, and we didn't put. I think at the time we didn't have it in the ad what we were paying, and he came in, and, he had an interview, and he said, "What's the compensation?" And I said, "It's depending on experience, 35 to 40 a year." And he said, "What's the commission structure?" "Oh, there's no commission." And he said, I'm sorry, I'm coin operated." You'd be surprised how actually rare that is. I mean, and how what we were looking for was people who were a couple things. One, empathetic. really wanted to get to know what the customer needs were. 2, we wanted to know that they were responsive, would get back to people. And 3, we wanted people who actually didn't want to be on a cutthroat sales team. They liked sales, they liked interfacing with customers, they liked helping customers, but they actually didn't like it when they were on these commission sales teams. And there's a ton of people out there who don't like that and would rather have a stable income with a team where they're helping each other out versus that's my lead, that's your lead, this is my territory, that's your territory. And we found a lot of great people who, again, it just made us that much more desirable, and then we delivered a lot more value to prospects because we didn't have have to fight the commission sales team mentality. It works in software as a service because people are already coming to us. They've already raised their hand because they're finding us on the search engine, coming to us and saying, serve my need. Versus, I think there's a place for commission salespeople when you're dealing with a much higher level enterprise, high-end $100,000 a year IBM kind of solutions. And I have friends at those levels, and yeah, they deserve to get paid what they do to have to navigate the BS in those organizations. But for the most part, today, the new model today, with people finding most of their answers and solutions via the internet, I actually don't think there's really a great place for commission salespeople. We also did team incentives. So I did want to create, there's a game element to commissions, and I wanted to continue to have the game element. So we would quarterly as a team say, okay, let's see if we can move the conversion rate on our live demo. Or let's see if we can move the conversion, we would have things where, hey, if we hit our goal for the week, whenever we hit it, if we hit it by Thursday or Wednesday, you guys take the rest of the week off. We'd have fun things like that going on, but it was always meant to sort of improve what we were, sort of still have a scoreboard that people could look at. And the peer pressure of it, we also shared how each person was performing with each other. And so there was, all right, who was the top performer this? Who was the top performer this week? There's an incredible amount of pride in doing a great job and doing it better than the people you're sitting next to as well. But, sorry. So, in any event, that's probably a longer answer than you
I know we've got some other questions. We'll promise to start here after the Q&A, but I want to bring up Donnie and Sarah and introduce people. First of all, thank you, Bill. That was great. Thank you. All right, so by way of introduction, in terms of panel, Sarah is one of my favorite stories off the CU campus. She started University Parent when she was a junior.
Yes, right before my senior year.
And what she identified fairly early on is, for those of you who are not familiar with the company, when you go to a campus like this one, there's usually a guide of restaurants and things to do around town and where's your kid going to be living. It turned out that most universities were losing money with those guides. And Sarah came in and said, I've got an idea for you. I'll do your guide in exchange. I will take on the risk and the profit, and this has turned out to be a terrific idea. Great to have Sarah here. And she's also been wrestling over the years with the question of, do I take on outside financing or do I bootstrap? To Sarah's left, your right, is Don. Are you professionally Donnie or Don?
When I answer the phone, Don's easier, but on the tennis court, I like Donnie. So,
so in addition to owning one of the wackiest forehands in Boulder, Don is someone who grew up in Boulder, went here to CU, completed the MBA program. While he was in the MBA program, he was part of a company in town called Lean & Tree. And then he went out on his own and stood up a company that he still is the CEO of Bloomin' Flower Cards. And so great to have Sarah and Don with us. I want to bifurcate this discussion into two parts. First of all, to spell out a little bit what Bill teed up first, the why in terms of the bootstrapping strategy, and then we'll get into some of the how, and then we'll go into questions. So Sarah, in terms of your analysis, walk us through at various stages why you've decided to bootstrap, and then I know that you've taken on some outside funding. Talk through some of the considerations there.
So when I was first getting started, kind of similarly to Bill, I just, I was a college student, I didn't have any money, and the idea was kind of, not accidental, but something that I thought I could pull off without getting outside money. And I basically, walked around downtown Boulder knocking on doors and got 12 advertisers to sign up. And it was enough to fund printing the very first guide. So I, was instantly profitable and kind of saw that the opportunity could grow itself from advertising revenue instantly. And then as I started trying to grow, it became really difficult to fund that growth with revenue. And there were some mistakes that I made that more difficult, like hiring people before I really could have afforded to hire them. And part of the bootstrapping thing for me was I couldn't raise money. Like I tried to raise money and I failed. So that really made it not an option. It was like, okay, revenue or die. So that was kind of the plan.
How long after you launched University Parent did you go out looking for outside financing?
I mean, seriously or casually, I feel like I was kind of constantly, on the hunt for outside financing. And when he was talking about you have to find a customer that will fund something, I mean, I was talking to some early people, early customers, saying, how about if we do this for you? Then will you pay us, this amount of money, and that amount of money magically would have paid for something I was lusting after at the company, So it was kind of a perpetual process, but then I raised money from 3 angel investors in 2009, which was 6 years later after I started. And it was really just a small amount of money to help us add on about 50 schools. And before we were trying to add like 2 a month, so it just helped us go a lot faster. But we haven't raised money since, and I don't plan to.
We'll come back to angel financing and how that looks different than VCs. There's some important drivers there. Donnie, what's your story in terms of financing?
Well, we started, 18 years ago strictly as a greeting card company, and I had a partner who had this idea about making paper. He was a master paper maker and putting seeds in it, but really didn't have any way to market this idea of seeds in the paper. And I had been working for a greeting card company. I was an artist, and I thought it was a great idea. I'd gotten my MBA here at CU and really wanted to strike out and find my own way with an entrepreneurial company. So we together started this idea of putting the seeds in the paper and presenting them as greeting cards. Tom, my partner, had started a bicycle shop, so he was still drawing some income from that. I was still working at Leaning Tree, and I like to tell people that it was really beneficial for me not only to continue to have some revenue coming in as I'm starting this new company, but also to learn the industry from the inside out on somebody else's nickel. That was really invaluable. I was learning the distribution channels and the suppliers and the customers and the relationships there. So really learning on somebody else's nickel was great, and to be able to have that revenue coming in was super. And I like to tell the story that I would load my truck up with these little displays of greeting cards, and I would drive to Fort Collins for one weekend, and Colorado Springs one weekend, and Santa Fe, New Mexico one weekend, and I was pretty driven to say I'm not coming back until all these displays are sold. And I had to account for the gas money and a Motel 6, and so it was really like pretty soon I was finding success, and then those stores were reordering, and I was getting more stores. And then, okay, all of a sudden we have a little pool of money. Let's build a bigger display of cards, and let's finally hire some artists. And, so it was a very gradual thing, and we really, to this day, continue to run the company that way. If we have a big job, now we might actually go out and buy a manufacturing facility. We own 2 buildings in Boulder, and we've done that when we've had the revenue to be able to support it. And, we might buy a new printer, hire a new artist. So it's not just the startup, but I feel like we've really maintained that bootstrapping mentality with, as the operating revenue allows, we can grow. And when margins are shrinking and cash flow is tighter, then we find ways to kind of cut back and, pay homage to, hey, I'm going to make sure that I'm being profitable along the way.
Just to get everything on the table, you heard Sarah say that 6 years in, she took some outside money from angel investors. I assume to buy some of the facilities, you've taken on some debt of one form or another. How have you financed that?
You know, eventually we were having some success, and when we needed it least, we went to the banks and shopped around lines of credit. And I've been able to maintain, you know, at first it was maybe $25,000 line, and then it was a 50 and 100, and I think now we have a $250,000 line of credit. So one of the other things I like to advise people on is to ask for it when you need it least, because you look really good on paper and the banks are saying, wow, you guys are profitable, this is a great idea, and you're paying your bills, you're contributing to Boulder's economic base, and we've been able to have that. And then by buying little, you know, real estate ventures along the way, that is now collateral. So if we need to go finance some equipment or extend our line, we look a little bit better. And so that's been really helpful. I didn't realize it at the time, but investing in some real estate has been a good move.
I want to take this back to something that Bill said in terms of one of the drivers as to why you prefer bootstrapping is, in your words, freedom. Okay? And so freedom versus control is always a trade-off when you're taking on outside money of any form. Maybe you can talk a little bit about freedom and bootstrapping in contrast to the VC fund model first. And then Sarah, I'm interested in hearing about the angel model and then freedom with respect to bank lines of credit. Donnie.
Okay, so the companies I've been involved with from a VC funding standpoint, there tends to be this, because the revenues of the company can't support the expenses, there tends to be, and that kind of continues to perpetuate $1 million in revenue, 3 million, 5 million, 7 million, just add a couple more million to each one of those numbers, and that's what the expense line is each time that we go through another round. But what tends to happen is it creates a very sort of schizophrenic or bipolar, I guess you'd call it, scenario where as the money starts to run low, the company starts to trim up, lay people off until the next round starts to come in, and then there's a hiring surge on the next round, and then it's this thing that for me doesn't feel comfortable on that. The other thing that I found is those founders and CEOs are spending too much time talking to the next round of investors, looking for the next round of investors, communicating with the past investors, and it starts to get really complicated. And the problem with that is it detracts from their time of being able to focus on what really is going to make the company successful, which is the customers, and being able to add more value to and find where the value really is with their current customers.
Let me linger on that. So the last crash course we had was on angel investing. It went really well. My favorite feedback from it was, wow, that was great, but Brad, you are really pedantic. So I'm going to have a pedantic moment, and I'll see if you have a question, which is that if you're talking about a VC fund, you're talking about a 10-year time horizon, at the end of which the VCs need to return the money that they've taken from limited partners back to limited partners. So with some exceptions, this means that usually if you're taking on VC money, you need to be ready for some sort of exit event, at least for those investors. That could be the form of a sale of the company, an IPO, a liquidation event, but some sort of exit. And I'm interested in the personal perspective for each of you. Don, you've been running the company for 18 years. Sarah, you've been with your company for some time now. How much of your decision to bootstrap has been, I really like this company, I have no desire to exit it, and I'd prefer to have control over whether we exit or not?
I've always had that desire. In the case of Reg Online, my partner had an opposing desire, so and he was a majority owner, so we sold. But as my current partners, the thing that we're looking to have built for life companies that we don't sell. So that's another reason why the VC model doesn't make sense, is that there is an exit on the other side that we just don't have a desire for. And the other part that couples with that, by the way, for companies that have taken on funding, they get to the point where they really do want to exit. And the reason is because there's no profitability to share, so they're taking their salaries, and sometimes they're not great salaries. But in my businesses, what I found is that we've got incredible profitability compared to our funded competitors. mean, 2 to 5 times as much profitability. Our profit margins on Reg Online were 45% net profit margins. On my other companies, they're range anywhere from 25 to 50%. And whereas competitors are, either they're unprofitable because they're funded or they're scraping by. So their way of being able to enjoy the riches of the value that they're producing is to, is to chop the head off the goose, so to speak, because the goose isn't laying any eggs, so they may as well, right? And in my case, I like the eggs, so.
Yeah, I like eggs too, and I feel like there have definitely been moments in time that, when I'm going through something really tough at the company, or we're in some hard situation where I'm like, I want out. I wish someone would buy me right this minute. But I'm so glad that didn't happen now, because now it's so much fun, and we're in such a great place because we are profitable, and this will be our 4th year profitability. We're making a great margin. I don't know where else I could make the margin that we're going to make, in any other investment. And for me, it's all about maximizing my personal potential and my professional potential with the company. And that's really what's driving my kind of horizon with the business. It's like, as long as I feel like I'm making an impact and making a significant contribution and enjoying it and learning a ton, I mean, where else would I go? Just like, it's so exciting at the moment.
A quick follow-up. So if I'm an angel investor, I do not have the fund pressures. I could potentially let the money ride with you. I'm probably excited that for 4 years in a row there's been profitability. However, I might want to either sell my equity in your company at some point or receive some distribution as a shareholder. How are you taking care of the angel investors, and how's that dynamic worked out?
So, my angel investors came in on a convertible debt note, so it was a little bit of a different deal, and then we converted it into equity a year later. So my plan for them is to buy their shares back at a multiple that we've talked about, but it's personal for each one of them, and all 3 are very successful kind of serial entrepreneurs. So they're not desperate for their money back or anything. They're not leaving angry voicemail messages for me. So, and I think that's part of too. You're asking, why did you set it up the way that you did? And a big thing for that was, I want them to be excited about the wealth and value we're creating for them long term, not someone who is trying to make a quick buck.
Donnie, in terms of your approach, does this company just feel like what you were built for, and you'd like to maintain control because it's what you love to do?
Yeah, at some point I think I felt like, Hallmark would swoop in and buy us, or there would be an exit before now. And I've just really, throughout the years, continued to enjoy what I'm doing. And it is a product that people get excited about, and I get excited to tell the story. I like selling it. I feel like we're still having some success with it, and yeah, I enjoy it. I consider myself an entrepreneur, but some days I have to step back and say, geez, I've been doing this for 18 years. I should have a whole slew of companies notched on my belt. And we've been able to reinvent the product in different ways that feels entrepreneurial to me, with promotional products and wedding invitations and selling OEM seed paper supplier. So I feel like I've been able to reinvent it internally, but yeah, I still wake up and I'm excited to go to work. So I'm not forced. That whole idea of having a VC 10 years into it, I might not have this any longer, and I might have had to sell it for a lot less than it was worth to me. So I don't think that scenario would have worked out very well for me.
Well, part of the conventional wisdom is that at least a good or a great VC is going to bring a wealth of things to the table besides for capital. It's going to be connections, pattern recognition of working with many companies in this area, perhaps taking a board seat, being regularly involved as an advisor. How have you substituted for those roles that a VC often would perform in your companies? Bill, you want to take it first?
Sure. From the get-go, I sought out mentors that really served as my informal board. And I always thought I was going to, in the back of my head, like, oh, it may come in handy. These guys know a lot of people and they can open doors for me. It's actually never I've never asked for it, and it's never been the case in any of my businesses, but that mentorship and guys who've, been in, angels who built companies on their own, hearing their war stories and coming from different angles and approaches was really, my intelligent network of that helped me, learn and navigate a lot of things that I didn't know for the first time. So.
Who's the most important mentor that you've had over the years, or one important one, and talk about how you developed that relationship?
So one of the ones earlier on was I actually went to an Esprit. Do they still have the Esprit entrepreneur thing, an event going on? Anyways, I had just moved to town. I was probably, 2 weeks. I had moved to Boulder, and I went to the Esprit conference, and I met a guy named Jeff Cohen, who's the founder of Allegro Coffee. And he looked like, he had a big beard, and when I just bumped into him and introduced myself in the hallway, and he said he was the CEO of Allegro Coffee, I was like, how can that be? But that's what I love about Boulder. So he then became, I really cherished my ongoing meetings with him. He then needed an extra office, which I had extra offices in as my company was growing, and he was great. He so yeah, that's one example. Another is Jimmy Colano, who built Career Track in town, and when I first moved to town, I would literally just cold call people that I read about in the paper and say, I'm a young entrepreneur. I love what you've accomplished. Can I buy you lunch and hear how you did it? And that's literally what I say. And I'd say probably, a third of them would respond and say yeah. And then so anyways, that's all I did.
How you guys substituted for some of that help?
Well, I did feel like there was a void there a little bit. Whether it wasn't I didn't have that much confidence in myself, or I just felt like, boy, I really could use just sounding board. I didn't really have a board. I still don't. I have had some mentors along the way. Dennis Knock, who's been involved with the entrepreneur program over at the business school, and some other family friends and stuff. But one of the things I did was I sat in and considered joining Vistage, which is a CEO peer group thing. But it was crazy expensive. It was $1,200 a month, $1,500 a month, and you're being thrown in the mix with some people that may not have anything in common with you at all, except they're CEOs. And then the discussion ensues, and it just didn't feel right. So I actually went out with another friend who owns a very successful eco packaging company, and we selected 8 people that also had like-minded companies. They were international distribution, manufacturing based, some kind of an eco spin, and we got these CEOs that are all similar age and like-minded mentalities, and we have breakfast together every single once a month on Wednesday mornings from 7 to 9:30, and it is so enriching and rewarding. It's really been something that I look forward to, and it's been really helpful just to share stories and, hey, this is something I'm struggling with, and we all take turns presenting our problem, and we try to offer advice in the form of a question, and we have kind of set rules to it, and it's been really great to kind of have that as a sounding board.
And I do something similar. I'm in EO, which is Entrepreneurs Organization, and it's a lot less expensive than Vistage, but there is an annual fee. But you're in a group of, everyone has to be a founder. You have to have $1 million in revenue 2 years in a row, so it really selects out the participants. But it's just been phenomenal for me. I've been in it for almost 4 years now, and it's been great. There's monthly learning events, and then the peer-to-peer learning. And then the other big resource is the university. I feel like I really got my tuition dollars worth because I still call and ask professors for help. And I've just gotten so much out of the people that I had in class, and then even the ones that are there now. So it's been an incredible resource, including the law clinic. So thank you.
Thanks for the plug. Frank Moyes, I assume, was one of the influential professors. For those of you who don't know, Frank Moyes taught here for a long time, was really a terrific asset here. And speaking of bootstrapping, what Sarah's alluding to is we have an entrepreneurial law clinic that provides free legal help to very early stage companies, not altogether unlike where Sarah was as a junior here, who would be otherwise blissfully ignoring her legal needs or resorting to self-help. So if that's where you are, feel free to follow up afterwards. And one final question before we get to some of the how of bootstrapping and drilling down on that. Under what circumstances would you go the VC route or a more significant outside financing route, private equity, whatever it is? What would be some of the drivers? And Sarah, I know you've thought through some of this. I'll start there. When would you take outside money?
Well, I mean, kind of thinking like outside of this company, I think that competitive risk is big. Like if you have a product and you have paying customers, and marketing is more of a math problem. Like if you see that if you apply, $1 million, you get 10, and it's profitable revenue, it's not just revenue for the sake of growing revenue, then I would do that all day long. But I think it really depends on what you're giving up to get that, and if the whole timing and if the timing makes sense. But really, I just think it comes down to math, like if that works or not.
I completely agree with that comment. I actually didn't think I had an answer of when I personally would, but that's it. If at Reg Online we would test out marketing, different marketing mailers and brochures and things, and finally we came across one that really produced $3 for every dollar we spent on mailing it out, and we had enough cash from our own profitability to fund and spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on it. But if we didn't, and we were earlier on, and we knew that we had that conversion rate nailed down, I would have raised money for it. I think there's if you're the other place where I see people doing it, which seems to make sense, and the VCs are perfectly prepared to have only 1 out of 10 succeed or 9 out of 10 fail, is if you're going after a big consumer segment that is you got to get to hundreds of millions of users before you're really going to have some ad dollars on it, and I'm exclusively pretty much exclusively in the B2B world of business, so bootstrapping's easier there. If you're going the consumer route, at least on the internet side of things, it can be harder. So that's where I could see people saying to people, you probably go out and raise some money before you all ever, to test market this to see whether or not you're really going to have any legs to it or not.
Never. Unlike my other panelists, I can't be bought. No, if there was we've had the opportunity to quote on doing seed paper and Happy Meals where the quantities are 120 million pieces or something, and it would require a big influx of some funding. But even in that scenario, if we were to extend the line all the way out and go to the bank and say, hey, this is a purchase order, there's solutions there. So I have trouble, unless I was going to, kind of segment a different division of the company and really branch out and try to set this part of it aside. I have trouble seeing a scenario where I would take VC money at this stage, having done it for so long and now having some financing in place.
Let's talk about some of the techniques in terms of how to bootstrap that you have brought to bear with your companies. Maybe let's start with a question in terms of, as you think back about the most improvisational or original thing that you did to make dollars go further in bootstrap mode, what comes to mind?
That's a great question.
I think one that I'm doing currently, hasn't been signed yet, but is pitching a product that doesn't exist and getting someone to pay for it before you build it. And that's literally what I did with the very first guide. But we have a big deal on the table with one of our existing clients. And I just kind of pitched the vision of what it could be and how it's going to help them. And there's someone who's seen returns from us year after year, so we already kind of have that trust built up. But I don't have the product. Does it exist? And it's going to take me some time to pull it off. But I think if they're excited about it enough to actually write you a check for it, why not?
I think negotiating constantly with suppliers for better terms and with customers, just trying to position. A lot of times, if you give them a better price, but they're paying in advance. Same thing with suppliers. We do a lot of that kind of creative, receivables and payables. So that's been a strategy for helping to extend the cash flow.
Give someone a discount if they pay in advance beforehand. Bill?
Yeah.
In one of my earlier companies, when I was in college, I would use exclusivity as a stronger way of collecting the money up front. So, hey, we're happy to keep this exclusivity. So this is another way of discounting in a way, but getting payment up front for the product. Now, before I got in the internet business where we're just automatically charging everyone's credit cards, we have no receivables and no inventory. Now it's even easier. But back then, when I was like, all right, I got to fund the printing production on this and pay my salesperson and this, getting those funds in advance and not having to figure out how to fund a cash flow discrepancy between expenses and cash coming in. I've never really. I've always tried to minimize any kind of need for receivables in any of my businesses.
That's why Warren Buffett liked the insurance model. Right?
Yeah,
Geico. In terms of something that Bill teed up, how do you build a team on a bootstrap? So, for example, you could envision management talent that you need this lead, this type of talent, or technical talent. How have you brought on board the kind of talent that your companies have needed without outside financing? Sarah?
Ooh,
Especially early on.
Yeah, I'm probably the wrong person to ask him this one because I have failed a lot on it. I've made just a ton of mistakes where it wasn't the right fit, or a person who was more expensive than we could afford at the time, but then there's all this tension around that, and I think it's really hard, and I think it's kind of an individual thing of finding that person that believes in what you're doing and has the financial stability or can afford what you're offering. I think there's a lot of danger, or at least I've seen a lot of danger in bringing in people that are used to making more than you can pay them and saying they can ride it out, but really they cannot ride it out, and have experienced some pain around that. But I think it's just super challenging. You've got to play with comp structures and messing with that, and then it's like the second the company grows a little bit, there's this expectation of more compensation. And the model might not support that at that time because growth is so expensive. So,
Who was your first outside hire?
Well, I don't know when you count my first outside hire, but I hired my college roommate, very early on, to sell ads for me. And I kind of my whole strategy was just to hire the job that I didn't want to do or that I was the worst at. So invoicing, I was a disaster at invoicing because I'm just not detail oriented. So the second I could get someone to do that for me was just, so exciting. And then even sales, it's the second you can hire a salesperson besides yourself, your revenue should double, right? So I just try and pick who I can hire carefully and still do the same thing. We were kind of talking about that earlier on website development, just whatever you can afford at the time that makes sense.
Yeah, I think for us, a lot of the positions we hire, assembly, printers, manual labor, customer service people, some lower skilled artists. So we're a little bit different. I'm not looking for top tier employees, but I just really feel like there is a great pool of people to hire in Boulder and really all around Colorado that, with Craigslist, if I run an ad in the morning, I can have warm bodies there putting cards together in the afternoon, lots of them. So when we get a big job and I need a lot of people to put things together, I can, expand really quickly. And then, boy, if that job's over and there's not another one in the pipeline right then, it's hard, but I got to let them all go. And so that's been part of our success, is being able to expand and contract really quickly. And yeah, that's one of the hardest things of what I do, is having to let good people go. But the good people are those that we find another position for them to try something else. And then pretty soon they've worked throughout the company doing a lot of different things, and lo and behold, he's the production manager now, or running the printing operation. So just maintaining that ability to expand and contract, and keeping the good people and letting the other ones go as soon as they're not a great one.
Bill, you mentioned using equity to incent someone to come on. Any cautions associated with that, especially for early stage companies?
Did I mention that?
I think you did.
Yeah, you know, I have to say that early on, I hired cheap, what I call cheap and eager, and I made the same mistakes that I think Sarah's referring to as well many times. Like I was like, wow, I can't believe I haven't learned it. And the thing with it was, with equity as a part of the offer, and the trap that I found myself getting into was, I'm going to screw this company up, and unless I get someone who knows more than me at these particular things, and I kept questioning or doubting that I really had the mind to figure this stuff out, or my mentors were enough, and so I really thought, like, okay, I need someone else to run alongside with to do these things. And I got overextended with them. I gave them, they were coming in, they were taking cuts, but it was like a fortune from my perspective, what I would be paying them. It was a lot of equity or stock options, which every one of them the same way, just it crashed and burned with those folks. And so what I eventually learned was that cheap and eager, every time that happened, I became so much more appreciative of my cheap and eager staff. Because they were able to accomplish so much more than these high-priced folks with good experience and resumes. And so I come back to like the one exception I think is on the, because I'm in technology businesses, is having an equity technology partner, but you gotta really make sure. It's a person you want to be married to. So anyone else that I don't want to be married to, I don't want to give equity. I don't want to give equity to. And I think there's sort of a way to test that out and get comfortable with it. Like for example, when my partner from Reg Online wanted me to get involved with his company, we both agreed, hey, let's take the next 6 months and start working together. And then we'll find out, and if that works out, here's kind of the general, what we're both generally thinking it would look like. After 3 months, we were so in love with each other as partners, so we decided to elope, so to speak, and we did the deal. But I've made so many more mistakes of like bringing people in, like hoping they were going to make the difference, moving them out from other places because like they just had that experience level that I go, I don't have that. They accomplish it in one failure after another. So. I don't know if that answers your question of how to, if you're going to do equity, don't do it up front, and don't even get tricked into sort of setting the structure up front. Maybe have some general idea on it, but it's a trap to keep off, keep throwing equity out there, I think.
I think it's really scary too, depending on what your exit vision looks like. Because for me, if I have no end in sight, I think for my employees that's not really very attractive because they probably don't want to work at University Parent for their whole life. I don't know, they might, but so I think that's a big issue. Like if you are VC funded and there is an end in sight, whether you like it or not, that makes a lot more sense than something that you could do individually.
And it comes back to that commission question too, I think. Sorry for interrupting. Yeah, because I think it's a similar thing where there's a lot of people who want to be a part of building a great company who are not looking to get rich or get rich quick. And they just want to be a part of a winning team in a growing organization, especially to have the pride in, this is something that I want to build and have be on my, on my gravestone, or, I want to build for life. It's worth that much to me. That pride, there's a lot of people that miss hearing and seeing that pride because we've got way too many people out there that are going after the money rather than looking to do something that really has lasting value. So,
a quick follow-up and then we'll open up for questions. In terms of lock-in, whether it's employees or angels, secondary markets are emerging that are providing greater liquidity without a full exit event of the company. Are you reluctant to go that route, or is that something that you've taken a look at?
Haven't taken a look at it. Definitely reluctant. I mean, I think it's back to, these people own your business, right? So whether it's majority or minority, they still have a seat at the table. And if you personally take a dividend, then they get a dividend too. You can't just give some to yourself. So I think, it's just like having, back to the spouse comment, I think that's really scary to have it going to a secondary market where you don't even know who they are.
We have set up some profit sharing for a salesperson and the production manager who's in control of the costs. But you can really do that in a way that you don't have to pay that person a dividend when you pay yourself a dividend. It's just simply kind of an end of the year bonus thing, and there's all kinds of different ways to structure that. But that really has motivated those two key individuals, the sales manager and my cost center.
And on that note of sort of sharing the ownership, not necessarily in terms of equity, but all 4 of my companies, we've started doing open book, which we shared full financials, profitability, and we're security and hell to show how profitable we were to our employees. And connected to that though was what's called gain share. So we said, listen, you help us increase the profitability from the trajectory we're already on. We're going to share 30% of that with the employees. And so this idea of sort of sharing with them how we're operating the business, they're getting a good education on how the business is running. On top of it, they really are feel a sense of ownership without any equity, stock options, and not even profit share, which I think is employees that sometimes can feel entitled to.
So you call that gain share?
It's gain share, and so everyone on the team forecast where we're heading on our current trajectory, because these companies, one of them is growing 8% a month, and they'll forecast where they think we're heading, and then we'll say, all right, based on that, this is we'll take the average of what everyone says. Above this line of where we're going to be, we're going to share in that with everyone equally, not based on what their salaries are or anything, because we say every person here, and it's true, has the ability to make an impact to improve our trajectory currently.
All right, let's open it up. Questions? I think we promised that we'd start here. Do you still have your question? We start there.
Could each of you, could you speak a little bit to the difference between, you start out with control, and then you start talking about time of delivery. You elected not to take equity. How much time did you give up, and how much market share did you give up by keeping control?
So I'll answer that in the terms of my best comparison would be Reg Online versus its largest competitor, and the competitor was already bigger when we got started, but was 3 times the size revenue-wise than us, because they really spent a ton of money on advertising and marketing that we didn't. But then again, they were less profitable than us at 3 times, and we were a third the revenue as them. So you could say, well, they were just reinvesting in a bigger future exit, and we say, that's not what we were going for. We weren't going for big. We were always going for great, and great in my mind was profitability equals a lot of sustainability, whereas they were constantly on the path to raise more money because their profitability wasn't enough to sustain them.
I was fortunate. I didn't have a lot of competitors at the time, but the mistakes that we made along the way, I think, were a lot smaller because we were growing at a slower pace. So I don't think I was at a huge disadvantage. But if I were coming into it now that I do have competitors, I think that's a real concern.
Yeah, I think it's a tough question to answer. I mean, who knows how big we could have been. But I also think, too, like, we made so many mistakes early on that we had to pay for and that we're still paying for when we used money that we didn't make from revenue. So I feel like, maybe we would have nothing now if we had gone a lot faster. I have no idea.
Other questions?
Bill had said earlier that
his bootstrap companies had better profit margins than venture-funded companies. Why do you think that was?
Maybe it was the high-price senior-level marketing position, or the high-price CFO, or the CTO, or the all these middle management positions for a company that had 20 employees. Maybe it was the incredible amount of unprofitable advertising dollars they were spending. Maybe it was because of the high cost of high legal fees of continuing to raise more money. Maybe it was the it's interesting because I looked at one of the companies with my partner from Reg Online that we were both investors in. We looked at their P&L and thought, oh my God, we could cut the expenses on this P&L in half easy and still provide the same value to the customers. So that, that would have taken an unprofitable company into a profitable company. But there was always this, well, if we just get this right guy to help, the senior level guy in here, just around the corner, we're going to, we're really going to crack the nut on a much bigger market. Was kind of the mentality, and I don't, I don't disagree with that potential and possibility. I just like I'm more conservative, and I like to know, to invest in things that are more certain. That, as Sarah pointed out, like, I know that dollar produced $2, and so I'll spend more money on it. But yeah, does that answer the question? Or the really nice offices. That's good line on them too.
Back to bootstrapping, not counting friends, families, and what's that other one? And also angels, which I'd ran across appear like just junior VCs anyway, because they can be just as strict. Not counting those, in the middle, just people out there. My question is, who had you targeted, or who do you recommend in general as targets, potential? I've run Craigslist, I've run across people, I've done a bunch of it. But it might be good to have a kind of a system thought. And then how, or how'd you go about it? And I don't mean specifically, if you have any general suggestions.
So your question is specific to
in
looking for what?
bootstrapping, not counting those other two, just people out there.
How do you find employees?
How would you go about it, and how would you target it? Who would you target?
For as
It may be
employees?
too general, I don't know.
As employees?
No, as funders, as bootstrappers, the money.
Credit card companies.
Yeah, I've heard that.
Seriously.
I will say, over the years, the most creative outside funding effort that has come out during one of our events is Paul Berberian, who's the CEO of Orbotics, was the CEO and founder of Raindance, which is a telecommunications, teleconference servicing company. And they found that if they called and complained to AT&T, that AT&T would automatically defer all bills for a month. And he said that he called something like 13 months in a row. And so AT&T was effectively bankrolling Raindance early on.
I think the first answer is your customers, or prospective customers. I mean, Sarah put it beautifully. Each one of the companies that I'm involved with currently started with, the customers basically being the original funding source, and so I think that's the best source. I've never been comfortable going anywhere beyond that, because if I'm not sure of a dollar of my, my own dollar returning more than $1, and then friends and family, I don't want to risk their money, even though there's lots of people, and I think it's perfectly fine to, as long as you're willing to say, plan on losing whatever dollars you give to me, because there's probably a 9 out of 10 chance you will, but,
Yeah.
So do you guys find that bootstrapped companies tend to be, I guess, flatter organizationally, fewer CEOs and management? And then also, on top of that, what would be an ideal number of partners to begin a company with, if there is one?
So 2 questions. One is, do you think you ran leaner, especially early on, as a bootstrap company? And second, ideal number of founders. Donnie?
I think definitely it's proven to be flatter, and I think some of the pitfalls that Bill talks about with the middle management thing is, as you're starting off, you just can't afford that. So yeah, I definitely think it's flatter. And what was the second question?
Ideal number of founders.
I have a partner that's 50-50, and for us it's worked that way, that we're checks and balances, and there's a lot of times where I want to go big and he brings me back down, and there's other times where he's in that role and I'm like, let's really take our time and think through this. And so for me, the 50-50 has worked really well, and maybe we're the exception to the rule with partnerships, but you definitely want to choose your partners wisely.
Yeah, just real quick, I think definitely flatter. I mean, we've seen, or we just definitely have had a flatter organization through the years. And then on the ideal number of founders, I mean, I only have experience with 0 co-founders, so I can't give you a whole lot of insight there.
I've had experience with both. 0 was a lot more stressful for, just me. Running the company was a lot more stressful for me. And I certainly, when I then ended up having a partner, it was great 90% of the time, and I had to, I was frustrated. We were both frustrated maybe 10% of the time with each other's decisions. But the key to it, I think, is having very discrete roles. Well, there's 2 keys. One is finding a person that you're really compatible with, that you've tested out working with, and you've got similar philosophies on things. And the second is having very discrete roles. So there's, even though my partner had controlling interests in the company, there was no time he really trumped me on decisions in my sphere. But we had very heated debates about things on both sides. But we were left it to each other to ultimately decide what to do on those. So if you find the right partner, I think it's more enjoyable for me, and certainly now with my current setup, it's really fun having partners. And I don't know if I'd ever say that because I've always been more of a lone wolf and an introvert, and I got my own way of doing things and get out of the way kind of thing. But it's surprising. So I also got married, which I never thought I would. But
Next company will be VC back from day one.
Yeah, right.
All right, one more question.
When a customer is interested in the product that you're developing and they're a large public entity, how can you protect your small business from them running away with your idea if you bring it into their company? So if you're bootstrapping with your customer, how do you protect your own company in the process?
So if I catch your question, if the customer is a large company that could potentially roll their own, how do you protect yourself from them saying, that's a good idea, I'll just go ahead and make this myself?
Right. They say, I like your software idea. Can you build that for us? We'll fund it, bring it into their company, and then they take it.
I had that concern early on. We were making cards for both American Greetings and for Hallmark and Leaning Tree as well, and our product was just so handmade. I don't think anybody really wanted to mess with it. And we were advised that we could spend a lot of money, trying to get trade dress and trademark. Well, we have trademarks, but patents, and we elected not to go down that path of just bottomless dollars and tried to make the best product we could. So left it to chance.
Sarah?
I think that's a tricky thing. I think it's all about the relationship that you have with the person that you're selling the product to, and also kind of how much secret sauce you unveil in that discussion. So, if you are really telling them that you're only bootstrapping this product specifically for them, and you don't have anything else or any other customers, I think that puts you in a really vulnerable position. So I would try and have several customers at least, so you can kind of protect yourself and make sure also that you're not just building a solution that would only work for one company. I think that can be dangerous too. And then the other thing too that you said, making the handmade paper is so hard. I think that's the other thing you could do in the sales process is try and help that customer understand, just how difficult and challenging it would be for them to do it on their own and really see the value in you. And that's one of the big things that we talk to schools about. Like, sure, you can make a guide for parents. A lot of them do it already. You know, that's the easy part, right? But what we bring to the table is knowing about working with all of these schools all over the country and understanding, you know, what parents, why they click on certain things on our site and why, you know, some articles work and others don't. So just kind of all that experience that you can really bring to the table that they can't.
And can you share a little bit about the product or industry is?
It's similar to your industry. It's directly competing with the speaker bureau industry. It's flipping it on its head. It's helping meeting planners and meeting folks design curriculum in a smarter way, giving them direct access to speakers instead of going to the bureau, who usually charges 25 to 35%. They take it as a commission. So it's allowing the speaker and the client to have more of a relationship, which for the speaker oftentimes leads to consulting and additional speaking engagements and also lowers costs for them.
So potentially disruptive in the speaker industry, and now you have 199 new competitors. Bill, any other thoughts along these lines?
Well, you're talking about a speaker bureau being a customer that might take it from you then?
No, like going into a big, like one of my, you know, for instance, like one of my larger clients, Cisco Systems.
Yeah.
They said that they were interested in the product and rolling it out company-wide.
Well, okay. So from that perspective, there's how many potential Cisco's or customers can you see using your product? Tens of thousands out there. I mean,
yeah, I mean, it's a huge market.
It's a huge market.
It's in the billions of dollars.
So similar to Sarah, at Reg Online, we would say to our customers, they say, "Oh, we can build this." You know, their tech guys would say, "We can build this in-house," right? And we'd say, "Great, use our product until you have it built. And in fact, copy our product if you want, until you have it built. But at least you can start running with it now." And what we found is once they got in there using it, it's like it didn't. These big companies, they don't want to build new capability, you know, new internal capabilities.
And they're slow and clumsy.
They're slow and clumsy, and you know, and it was a great way for us to build confidence in them and show trust. And as long as, if you told me you were selling to speaker bureaus and there was only 5 big speaker bureaus and one of them was going to take it and run with it, I'd say, yeah, I'd be afraid of that. But if you got 10,000, you know, thousands and thousands of customers that, you know, I'd say, yeah, great. If you want to copy it, in the meantime, you know, start using our capabilities, and then if you know, I wouldn't worry about it.
So,
but yeah,
this has been terrific. A reminder that there's going to be a reception right next door in Betcher Hall. Please first help me thank Bill, Sarah, and Donald. Sarah, you got